Good afternoon, Ohio State fans. This is Patrick Murphy here with Bucknuts and 247 Sports. I'm joined with a special guest here on a special Bucknuts Morning Five taking place here in the afternoon. We wanted to record this. Blake Brockermeyer, former All-American at Texas, played 9 years in the NFL, 2 years on the SMU staff, where, Blake, as you just told me, you worked with Randall Joyner, who gave you some insight into this Ohio State program a little bit. Is that right?
Oh yeah, Randall's was really enamored with obviously Coach Johnson, who's one of the best D-line coaches in the country, if not the best D-line coach in the country, and just the culture that Coach Meyer had and the staff and just what an amazing place it was.
Well, we're going to be talking about this Oregon game. I know Buckeye fans have kind of put it in the past, or at least tried to. Obviously, Ohio State loses to Oregon on Saturday. 28. Blake, you wrote a good piece for us today, kind of analyzing what Oregon was successful in doing to, break down the Buckeye defense. What was the biggest thing that you noticed when you were watching back the film that Oregon was able to do and Ohio State wasn't able to stop?
Well, Oregon's a tough out. I mean, that's really the first time I've studied them extensively, and they make everything look run-in pass-wise similar. So unless it's third and long, obviously, but first and second down, normal down and distance, everything looks kind of the same. They just kind of window dress it up differently. So your eye discipline is challenged. You've got to make sure your run fits and your gap responsibilities are perfect. And, with a running quarterback like they've got, it's really a tough offense to defend. And Coach Moorhead just did an amazing job exploiting some weaknesses in Ohio State's defense.
You mentioned the run fits, and I think that's something that, if you're a guy who knows football, the Buckeyes didn't do a great job of. Explain to, if people out there that maybe aren't football people, that are just the casual fan, what had to happen to kind of solve that problem and what Ohio State didn't do correctly to stop, especially on those touchdown runs, it's more or less the same play to the left side of Oregon's offensive line.
Well, they found a weakness in the boundary of Ohio State's defense, and they really exploited that the entire game. Like you said, they basically scored on the exact same play on the in the red zone three times in one play and out, and they ran power bounce twice, and they ran a outside zone pin and pull play once, which is essentially pretty much, it's not essentially the same play, but it's they were getting to the outside, and they would bring the tight end or someone in motion generally, and they would crack down, and then they'd have two receivers that would block three defenders, and they'd clog it up because they knew they were in man, and then they would just skate in the end zone easily. But as far as the run fits, you can do it a bunch of different ways. You've got to account for the quarterback on every single play because he can run the ball. And, they were motioning guys out of the backfield to get the will linebacker to chase so they could get a little more space. It was really just creating a numbers mismatch. And then Oregon just seemed to dial up every play perfectly to go against them.
That numbers thing is something Urban used to talk about a lot when he was at Ohio State, and something Ohio State was good at doing when he was here. This isn't something that the Buckeyes had to be surprised about. I mean, Joe Moorhead ran a very similar offense when he was at Penn State. The Ohio State defense, though, it sounds like from what you're saying and from what others have said, this man-to-man defense has been able to be exploited, not just by Oregon, but go back to Alabama in the national championship game, Clemson, even Indiana last year. When you're a team that plays this single high safety, cover one, cover three, is this just ways that teams can exploit it, or are there ways that the Buckeyes can still be better, can improve from this?
Well, most teams do play man, in the red zone. I mean, that's a pretty normal deal. You can heat them up. Most teams, bring a lot of pressure in the red zone to try to heat guys up to make them get rid of the ball quickly. You can disguise your coverages and make it look like you're in man. Because what you see everywhere now in college football is you'll see a receiver, they'll bring a guy in motion, and then if someone's trailing him and following him, then they know right then that they're in man. But there's ways you can disguise it, and Ohio State just needs to do a better job of, maybe playing man some. Obviously, sometimes you want to do that, but you've also got to make it look like you're in man sometimes, and then not be in man and drop into zone. So, it's all about disguise and giving teams different looks and giving the offense something that they're not ready for. But to get scored on essentially the same play 3 times in a row just is something that just can't happen. I mean, one time they get you, that happens in football, but 3 times is that shouldn't happen.
And Ryan Day said essentially the same thing after the game. And then today talked about that the Buckeyes are looking at everything. He didn't want to go into detail about what Ohio State's doing defensively, but it sounds like there will be some changes when Ohio State takes the field next this Saturday. One of the things I noticed from your piece, which I encourage Buckeye fans to go read, it's on the front page at Bucknuts, analyzing Ohio State's schematic undoing versus Oregon. You talked about the linebackers or the receiver or the cornerback, that was blocked on the outside. Often 2 guys ended up getting blocked on the same play. Does that look to you to be a schematic thing where coaching is the problem, or is that young players not making the right reads, not recognizing what's going on with the offense, even though they may have seen it a couple times already?
Well, the offenses are smart, so they'll run man and they'll bring the receiver in the box, and then they'll snap the ball when he's already in the box, so they've got leverage on him. So everyone's doing that, or they'll like Alabama did last year, they'll bring a guy in the box and then they'll orbit him back out of the box, and then it's just a race to the end zone. So there's lots of ways to dial it up and scheme it up, but they obviously had a good beat on what Ohio State was doing, and it's really just being able to adjust in the game. I mean, that's what all great college football programs and pro football teams do, is they adjust during the game, and the coaches that adjust the best usually win.
And that certainly was apparent on Saturday. Let's flip over to the offensive side of the ball, and you didn't touch as much on this in your piece, but you played offensive line at this level. Ohio State's offensive line came into the season very highly talked about, multiple 4, 5 level players. They moved some guys around to get what they deemed to be the best 5 offensive linemen on there. Only 2 sacks given up through 2 games. Both of those came against Oregon. One came very late. I think it was the last play of the game when they were just trying to make something happen. So pass protection was pretty good. But the run game didn't develop the way that I think Ohio State would have liked. You kind of saw the Buckeyes go away from that in the second half. When you looked at this offensive line, and I don't know how much you studied that side when you were looking back at this game, but what are you seeing that's working? What are you seeing that's maybe still needs to get fixed, still needs to get better?
Well, they've obviously got a lot of talent, and it's just, to me, it's just they got to continue to play together. I mean, they've moved basically a bunch of offensive tackles around and put them in at different positions on the O-line. So it might take a game or 2 to adjust to that. I mean, from what I've watched, they've done a pretty good job. I mean, they've got big guys that can move. I noticed that the tight end, number 85, is a really good blocker. I noticed they ran a lot of zone seal, and they were cutting it back to the backside behind him, and he was washing his ends down. So, they've got the pieces. They've got the running backs. I thought CJ looked a lot better than he did against Minnesota, which, I mean, he's only played 2 games, so that's exactly what you'd expect. I thought the Ohio State offense fought until the end. That they were scheming Oregon up pretty well too. I mean, they had a lot of the same throws in between zones where they were hitting the slot receiver in the middle of the field. They had a lot of guys wide open. They were dumping the ball down to the back. So when you can get the playmakers that they have in space, then Ohio State's offense is going to be fine. It's just as long as the quarterback can continue to keep the ball in Ohio State's hands.
And you mentioned the quarterback. Ryan Day said today, he was asked about, has he thought about going away from CJ Stroud? Obviously, Ohio State has some other very talented quarterbacks on the roster. He said with the way CJ Stroud played, he has no intention of making any changes there. Just your assessment of him. You touched on him a little bit there. Only 2 games, small sample size, but threw the ball 54 times, I think it was, in this game. You obviously get a better look when a quarterback's doing that. Maybe dealing with a bit of a shoulder issue. He touched on that a little bit after the game. But just your analysis of CJ Stroud. He's missed some throws, but he's also made some pretty impressive throws from what I've seen.
Yeah, I thought, the first game when I first started watching him against Minnesota, I was kind of like, oh, I don't know this. I'm not sure about this, but it's first game. He's never done it before at this level. I mean, he's done it in mop-up time, but as a starter, so it's a different game. I thought there was definitely improvement in between week 1 and week 2 against a better defense. I thought he's not making every single throw perfectly, but I mean, you wouldn't expect that. If he did that, that would be something really special. So I don't see a problem with him at all. I think Ohio State's offense is as good as it wants to be. They got all the pieces that you look for to have an elite offense, and they're going to have to score a lot of points this year from what I've seen, but they can do it. I mean, they've got the weapons and receivers and O-line and running backs to do it. So, and a good tight end that I think if I were at Ohio State, I'd want to get the ball in his hands a little bit more too.
And you mentioned scoring a lot of points. That was something the Buckeyes had to do at times last year, especially when they played good opposition, with equal level talent. The Clemson game, the Indiana game, obviously couldn't do it in the Alabama game. If in your eyes, with this defense, are there ways to get better if Ohio State makes the proper adjustments, or do you see something that maybe is going to cost the Buckeyes throughout the year? What kind of changes need to be made to get this defense so that Ohio State isn't scoring 40, 50 points a game just to get a win?
Well, some of the success that they had they were stunning the defensive linemen. They were running a stunt, which I call a ton stunt, which the tackle goes first, the 2-eye goes second. It's a little inside game where they're penetrating and canceling gaps inside. That worked almost every single time. So, that's something that I would continue to do. And then they brought a cat blitz off the field side one time. They got a nice 1-yard gain on that. They ran a couple of cross dog blitzes that had some success with. So, if I would look at mixing and changing up my coverages and blitzes, maybe heating up the quarterback a little bit more with pressures and creepers, and canceling gaps with my defensive lineman, moving the defensive lineman around, making the running back go one direction where he has to go one way. I mean, you can always run the stunt where the 3 technique shoots up the field, the defensive end comes underneath, and that way you force the running back to one side. There's a lot of different ways to do it. Their staff is obviously a quality staff, so they know their personnel a lot better than I do. But that's why they make the big bucks, and they're going to have to adjust, or it's a cold world. They're not going to be there for long if they don't.
Absolutely. Well, Blake, I think we touched on a lot of good things here. Again, I encourage everybody, Ohio State fans, to go read Blake's piece. It's on the front page of Bucknuts. It's just kind of breaking down the schematic advantages that Oregon created. I know it might be tough for Buckeye fans, but I think it is a good explanation of what happened and kind of why Oregon was able to do what it could do. If you enjoyed these type of videos, we'll be doing more of these. You've seen some of them with me and Dave Biddle, post-game, pre-game, me and Steve Hellwagon. So subscribe, whichever medium you're watching through. Blake, thanks for taking time out of your day to do this with me. I appreciate your breakdown and all the good work you do for us at 247 Sports. So thanks for doing that with me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on. I wish it was under better circumstances for Ohio State fans.
Yeah, well, it's a long season. I'm sure there'll be some games where we can talk some positive throughout the course of the year. Again, thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll be back. Dave Biddle and I will have a video later this week kind of previewing what's next for the Buckeyes once we get a little more insight, once we talk to more people at Ohio State. So thanks again. Thanks, Blake. We'll talk to you